Joining us on the line is Victor Davis Hanson. He, of course, is the Martin Illig Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution, where he specializes in classics and military history. He's written, of course, an amazing number of tremendous books, including Carnage and Culture, The Case for Trump, The End of Everything. Professor Victor Davis Hanson, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, man.
So let's assess where the Trump administration is at this point in time. Right now, it looks as though the economy is moving along, probably slowing a little bit. We probably are going to get a reduction, I would assume, in the interest rates from the Federal Reserve at the next Federal Reserve meeting. But there's sort of mixed signals in the economy. On the international level, it looks as though the war in Ukraine is going to continue for the foreseeable future. And it seems as though Israel's about to make some major moves in Gaza. What do you make of kind of the state of play for the Trump administration now that we are, 7 months in?
Well, it's waging the most ambitious counter-revolution I think I've ever seen in my life, much more fundamental and multifaceted than the Reagan Revolution. And by that, I mean certain issues are now moot. He's closed the border. There is no more illegal entry. It's just a question of how do you get the 12 million that came under Biden out? We were told there would be 55,000 short military recruits because of systemic problems with gangs or drugs or competition with private enterprise. That proved to be fallacious. He solved that problem. I don't think I'd ever imagined, as somebody who spent nearly a half century in the university, that he would have them pretty much asking for compromises, and they are now culpable, and they admit they're culpable on anti-Semitism, gouging the federal government on federal grants, systemic racism on theme houses, graduation, safe spaces. So he's really caused a DEI academic revolution. As far as the war, these two wars go, the instigators or the attackers, Hamas and Russia, apparently, and their supporters feel that the war went against them and they have no rationale for the types of losses they incurred and the humiliation they incurred. So they're not really going to give up unless they can go back to their masters and say, this was worth it in the cost of benefit analysis. So I don't know where the magic point is for Putin, how far west of the Donbass and Crimea he's got to explain to his base, the oligarchs and the military, that he lost 1 million Russian casualties basically to just start out with what he had. He had Crimea, he had the Donbass, he had pretty much de facto certainty that Ukraine wouldn't be in NATO. And I don't know what he's gained for all that losses, but he apparently feels he's got to show something more. And I don't know where that magic line of a DMZ will be, but I think that's what the negotiations are. The other problem with Israel, Scott, is that they've got an existential enemy that tried to, it would destroy the Jewish state if it ever had the capability. And its patron, Iran, has been defanged. Hezbollah has been defanged. So here we have this remnant, subterranean remnant, and you've got the international community trying to say that resurrect it. You've got the people of Gaza, from latest polls, seem to want to resurrect it, and Israel can't resurrect it. And so it's just a question of what are they going to do about it? How are they going to? They've been into Gaza once, and it was I don't think it was in their interest to get anywhere near there again. But they can't leave it be. So they're in an existential dilemma, doom loop. They can't let it be, and they don't want to go in there and run things. And so we'll see what happens. But it really hurt their efforts that the international community sort of gave a life raft to this dying Hamas cause.
If you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. In today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles, and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document. They use a fake notary stamp. They pay a small fee with your county, and just like that, your home title is now transferred out of your name. Then they take out loans using your equity or even sell your property, and you won't even know that it's happened until you get a collection or a foreclosure notice. So when is the last time you actually checked on your home title? Well, if your answer is like most people, never, you probably should do that right now. And that's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can find out today if you're already a victim. A lot of people at the Daily Wire, including people on this team, trust Home Title Lock to protect what is likely one of their biggest assets. Again, much of your value, just as a person with assets, is in the chief asset you own, which is your home. Why would you make that vulnerable? Use my promo code Shapiro at HometitleLock.com. You'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Don't be a victim. Protect your equity today. Go to HometitleLock.com. Use promo code Shapiro. That's HometitleLock.com. Promo code Shapiro. You know, one of the things about President Trump that I've said many times is that he is heterodox in many of his views, but he's also responsive to reality in a way that many other presidents are not. He's non-ideological, which means that he's quite pragmatic. So he might start off his administration taking an almost neutral position between Russia and Ukraine. But if Ukraine comes to the table and Russia doesn't, then he will say Ukraine has come to the table, Russia has not. And he will up his support for Ukraine. If he looks at the Middle East, he's not going to make an ideological commitment to neutrality between a terrorist group and a democratic ally of the United States. Even when it comes to the economy, there's been a lot of talk about President Trump's tariffs. The most sort of extraordinary of those tariffs, he has walked back to a certain extent. He's still keeping a large tariff regime, an almost unprecedented tariff regime in place. But it seems to me that if the economy starts to slow too significantly, you might see him attempt to relieve some of that as well. That pragmatism has backfooted a lot of his political opponents. And so it seems as though the only real obstacle to the success of his continuation and his administration would come in the form of either an economic downturn or in the form of some unforeseen scandal. Is that analysis fair?
Yeah, I think it is. And if we had this conversation in January of 2020 when things were booming, it was pretty clear that he was going to be reelected until the COVID thing hit. And I think that destroyed his reelection chances. But he's in unknown territory. We've never had a president that has pledged his presidency on the assumption that these people who were running vast surpluses with us, China, Japan, South Korea, the EU, they had a profit margin of which we didn't know what it was, but he's saying that they can still make a profit without without in a great deal of raising prices and pricing them out of the U.S. market and still pay the tariff. And they don't want to admit it, but he suggests that's accurate. He also feels that while the Wall Street Journal might say that trade deficits don't matter and tariffs are bad, then why does China and the EU and all these brilliant nations adopt the things that we're told are injurious to them? But I guess in the larger picture, what he's trying to do is square the circle. He said that he's not going to cut defense. He's not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. He's not going to raise taxes. And he's going to do all these incentives that will kick in, he thinks, before the midterm. And this is deregulation, investment incentives, lower taxes. But he's got to show some progress in addressing this $2 trillion budget deficit. And the way that he's trying to do it is very interesting. Scott DeSantis said the other day that if the tariffs continue, they might get $300 billion in new revenue. The Doge people think they can get $200 billion in cuts. And Trump is going wild over Jerome Powell. But the subtext of that is we're paying $3 billion a day in interest. And if you can get down maybe a half a point or 3/4 of a point, you might save another $200 billion in annual interest. And before you know it, you've cut $700 billion from the $2 trillion, which is, 30 or 40% is pretty good without raising taxes and without touching defense and entitlements. I think that's what he's trying to do. And that's why he's so inflamed and angry at Powell. Because Powell, on the one hand, says, in the Wall Street Journal in March and April, we're saying the stock market's not going to come back. We're going to be in a recession, stagflation, the tariffs are going to cause a trade war. You would think that as someone who agreed with that assessment, he would have lowered interest rates. And then when he didn't, and everybody said, well, things are getting better, then he didn't, you could see why he kept them, because he said he was afraid of inflation, but there was no evidence there was any inflation. It was about 2.4, 2.5. It's gone down. In January, I think the whole year, 7 months, is 2.4 inflation. So he's not consistent, but one thing is consistent. He's sort of a Merrick Garland wounded fawn. He's somebody that had been attacked by the opposition and wounded and never got over it. And too late, Powell, and all of that rhetoric, I don't think he can digest it and be empirical vis-a-vis Trump. And it's tragic because I think the economy justifies a lowering of interest rates, and that would do a lot for the deficit. And more importantly, it would get a lot of people in homes they can't afford. But I don't think he's going to do it in the same way that Merrick Garland just seemed to be obsessed with going after Trump, although in a Kendall-Stein way.
I mentioned there the situation with the economy, and then the other possibility is the possibility of scandal, and this brings us to a bizarre drumbeat on some parts of the right, tremendous focus on Jeffrey Epstein. You understand why the Democrats would jump on the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, because for the Democrats, if you need some club to wield against President Trump, and the only handy club is the Jeffrey Epstein case, then you wield it against President Trump. But it appears fairly clear from the evidence that we know about, and also the people who are actually in charge of looking at that evidence, that Pam Bondi basically got over her skis, the Attorney General, that she suggested that she had access to materials that didn't exist, or she exaggerated the content of those materials. And then essentially the DOJ and FBI had to walk that back in their iterated ruling. You'll get some release of some more documents, but probably the underlying judgment won't change. What's fascinating to watch is some people on the right, not people who have, I think, open and legit questions about where Jeffrey Epstein got his money, which, again, is understandable, or people who are frustrated because they were promised more, but people who are fully confident that there is some sort of nefarious cover-up going on inside the Trump administration and seem bound and determined to elevate the Epstein case to the front page every single day. What do you think is the motivation there?
I think what happened was they were very, as you said, they got ahead of their skis. They were very enthusiastic when they saw the initial evidence. They thought this would be another sign that the Trump administration is far more transparent than their predecessors. And then when they looked at the 170 names that appear in text messages, emails, court inquiries, interrogatories, there's a lot of people there. I mean, there's Leonardo DiCaprio, there's Bruce Willis, there's all these names, and we have no idea why they're there. When on a 1 to 10, they could have just bumped into him. They could have said hello. They could have seen him in a party. They could have tried to raise money with him. They could have done a business deal. Or at a 10, they could have been involved nefariously. And I think once she said that, they must have been swarmed by calls from people who say, if you release this information, I'm innocent, but I'm going to be ruined for life. I'm a donor. I know you people. Why are you doing this? And I think they made a mistake at that point and backed off. And now I think they're trying to correct and say, you know what, whatever damage we do by letting the names out and letting people adjudicate for themselves the degree of culpability, it's a lot more damaging to try to keep it under wraps. If there had been incriminating information about Trump or major conservatives, it would have been leaked under the Biden administration. We know that. They leaked everything. They leaked everything about the Jack Smith, the Fannie Willis. That it was just like Russian collusion under the first Trump admin. They leak. So I don't think there's anything there that's particularly embarrassing to Trump.
Well, that's Professor Victor Davis Hanson. Again, you can go check out all of his work at the Hoover Institution, among other places, and obviously check out his fantastic books. Professor Victor Davis Hanson, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.